Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. Today we are unpacking a topic that really it dictates the ceiling of your career and, honestly, the survival of your business. We are taking a deep dive into the engine room of every organization. Decision-making.
It sounds like such a basic thing, doesn't it? I mean, we decide things all day long, what to have for breakfast, which email to answer first, but when you actually peel back the layers in a professional setting, it is. Well, it's shocking how few organizations have a real system for it.
That is the hook that grabbed me. We're looking at this amazing guide by Felix Römer, Decision-Making Models, Choosing the Right Path in Business. And right out of the gate, there's this statistic that it just hits hard.
Oh, yeah.
Römer notes that only about 20% of people believe their organization actually excels at decision-making.
20%, that's a brutal number. It implies that, 80% of the workforce feels like they're just wasting their time? Exactly. Wasting time. It paints this picture of people in endless meetings, watching the clock, wondering if they're actually moving the needle or just talking in circles. It feels like most of us are just winging it.
Winging it is exactly right. And in today's landscape, you've got remote teams, data is overflowing, market trends shift.
Yeah.
Weekly winging it is a very expensive habit.
Right.
If you don't have a structured playbook for how you make choices, you're not just being inefficient. You're actively bleeding competitive advantage.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to take Römer's guide and actually build that playbook. We're going to look at how to turn what he calls fuzzy problems into measurable outcomes. We'll cover the whole spectrum, from the slow, deliberate, rational models to the quick survival tactics for when the building is essentially on fire.
And we have to get into the toolkit, too. It's one thing to know the theory, but we need to talk about RAPID, the Pew Matrix, and all the cognitive biases that are basically hardwired into our brains to trip us up. Okay, let's start with the foundation. The guide lays out a spectrum of models. On one end, you have the rational approach. This feels like the textbook method. Very logical, sequential, safe.
It is the gold standard for a reason, but it's also the most, resource intensive. The rational approach is what you use when the stakes are massive and you absolutely cannot afford to be wrong.
So like a pharmaceutical company deciding which drug to take to clinical trials.
Exactly that. Or a manufacturer choosing a location for a billion-dollar factory.
Römer outlines a 7-step process for this. And looking at the list, it feels like most of us. We start at step 3.
You're absolutely right. The 7 steps are rigorous. Step 1 is identifying the decision and, crucially, the success criteria. Step 2 is gathering information. Step 3 is generating alternatives.
And see, that's where we usually start. We see a problem and we just immediately jump to, okay, what should we do? We skip that criteria phase entirely.
And that's why so many decisions fail. If you don't define what success looks like before you start brainstorming, you're just throwing darts in the dark. You have to set the criteria first, the constraints, the budget, the must-haves. Then and only then do you generate alternatives.
So you're setting the rules of the game before you play it.
Precisely. Step 4 is evaluating those alternatives against the criteria from step 1. Step 5 is weighing the evidence. Step 6 is the choice in action. And step 7, which I would argue is the most neglected step in business today, is the review.
The post-game analysis.
Yes. Did we actually get the outcome we predicted? If you don't review, you don't learn, and your decision-making model never improves. You just keep making the same mistakes on different projects.
But here's the pushback I imagine listeners might have. That 7-step process sounds exhausting. If I use that for every single decision, like what to put in the newsletter this week, I'd never get anything done.
And that is the trap. The rational approach is fantastic for accuracy, but it is terrible for speed. It assumes you have perfect information and unlimited time. In the real world, we rarely have either.
Okay, so this is where the guide pivots to a concept that I think is a game changer for high-speed teams. Bounded rationality.
This is a concept from the economist Herbert Simon. It acknowledges that we are bounded or limited. Limited by the info we have, by our cognitive power, and most importantly, by time. So Simon argues that instead of optimizing for the absolute perfect choice, you should satisfice.
Satisfice. That's a mashup of satisfy and suffice, right?
That's it. In a business context, this is your emergency protocol. Let's say your e-commerce site crashes on Black Friday. You do not launch a 7-step rational analysis to find the most elegant engineering architecture for the next decade.
No, you just want the site back up. Every second is lost revenue.
Right. You set a threshold. The site must be functional. The first option you find that crosses that threshold, You take it. You stop looking. You don't waste time seeing if there's a slightly better idea 3 hours from now.
So it's about stopping the search once the minimum requirements are met. It prevents that analysis paralysis.
Exactly. It's accepting that the cost of delay is higher than the cost of imperfection.
Now, there's a middle ground here. We've got the almost robot-like rational model, and we've got the good enough satisficing. But what about gut feeling? I feel like we're always told to ignore our gut, but Römer argues there's actually a science to it.
This is one of the most fascinating parts of the guide. It's called RPD, or Recognition Primed Decision Making. This validates what seasoned experts do all the time. It's not magic, and it's not just a guess. It's high-speed pattern matching.
How does that work in practice? Is it just for, like, creatives?
Not at all. Think of a veteran project manager. They might look at a perfectly logical Gantt chart and just say, this isn't going to work. They can't immediately prove it with data, but they recognize a pattern. Maybe the dependency flow looks like a project that failed 5 years ago.
So their brain is running a simulation.
Yes. They see a cue, their brain searches a library of thousands of past experiences, finds a match, and simulates the outcome. If we do X, then Y will likely happen, and this happens in a split second.
The catch, I assume, is that you actually need the experience.
That's the critical warning. RPD works if you're an expert. If you're a junior employee with no library of experience, your gut is just a guess. You should stick to the rational model. But if you're a leader, you shouldn't be afraid to leverage that intuition, provided you can validate it.
There's one last model here that I want to touch on because it deals with leadership style, the Römer model. It sounds like something out of science fiction.
It's basically a decision tree for leaders. It answers the question, who needs to be involved? Because sometimes the mistake isn't the decision itself, it's how you made it. Did you just announce it? Did you consult the team? Did you hold a vote?
And Römer gives you a path to choose the right style.
It asks you questions like, is the quality of the decision important? Is team commitment crucial for implementation? If buy-in is critical, you can't be an autocrat. You have to use a collaborative model. But if the team trusts you and time is short, it tells you to just make the call.
It's a decision about the decision.
Yeah.
It's a nice segue into the toolkit.
Yeah.
Because knowing the models is great, but eventually you have to get people in a room and actually agree on something, and that is where the friction happens.
The people problem is almost always harder than the data problem.
Yeah. The guide discusses a few frameworks for this, and the big standout is this battle between RACI and RAPID. Most of us know RACI responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. But the guide suggests RACI might actually be bad for decision-making.
RACI is excellent for execution, for knowing who is doing the work. But for deciding strategy, it can be a disaster. It often leaves you with a responsible person who doesn't have the authority to decide, and an accountable person who is too detached to get the details. It just breeds confusion.
So enter RAPID. How does it fix that?
RAPID, which was developed at Bain & Company, is explicitly designed for decision rights. The letters stand for recommend, agree, input, decide, and perform.
The distinction that caught my eye is between agree and input. In a normal meeting, those feel like the same thing. Everyone is just, giving their 2 cents.
That distinction is the secret sauce. In rapid input means you get to have your say, you provide data, you give an opinion. But if the decider chooses to go a different way, well, you've been heard, and now you must commit.
Okay, and agree.
Agree is a much more powerful role. This is usually for someone in legal or finance. It means they have veto power. If the legal team does not agree, the proposal cannot move forward, period.
I see. So it stops that ambiguity where someone from marketing says, I don't agree, and the whole project stalls. If they only had input rights, the decider can say, I hear you, but we are moving forward.
Exactly. And RAPID makes it crystal clear who the the decider is. There is only one decider. If you don't know who has the D, you don't have a decision process. You just have a debate society.
So once we know who's deciding, we still need to weigh the options. The guide offers the Pew Matrix. This looked like a way to take the emotion out of the room.
It really tries to turn feelings into math. The Pew Matrix is great for choosing between, say, prototypes or vendors. You take your current situation, the status quo, and that's your baseline. You score it as a 0.
Okay, so everything is compared to what we have now.
Right. Then you look at option A. Is it better than the baseline on cost? If yes, it gets a +1. Is it worse on implementation time? That's a -1. Is it the same on quality? That's a 0. You just sum up the scores.
It forces you to be objective. You can't just say, well, I really like option A. You have to prove it helps across specific criteria.
It exposes the trade-offs. It might show you that option A is fantastic for cost, but terrible for everything else, which results in a negative score. It just strips away that halo effect.
For quicker, less formal decisions, the text mentions the BRAIN acronym.
BRAIN is a pocket tool. B for benefits, R for risks, A for alternatives, I for intuition. Don't ignore that gut feeling we talked about. And N is my favorite part of this entire guide.
N stands for nothing.
What happens if we do nothing?
That is such a powerful question. We are so biased toward action. We feel like if there's a problem, we must do something.
But often, the cost of the cure is worse than the disease. Asking, what's the cost of doing nothing, can reveal that a situation isn't actually an emergency. It gives you permission to wait.
You mentioned being biased toward action, which brings us to the psychological minefield of decision-making. The guide warns that even if you use rapid and a Pew matrix, your brain is actively trying to sabotage you.
This is the real why it matters section. Cognitive biases are the invisible enemy. You can have the best data in the world, but if your filter is warped, you will make the wrong call. Römer highlights the big 5 biases.
Let's run through them. First up is confirmation bias.
The classic. You have a hypothesis. This marketing campaign will work. And you subconsciously filter out any data that suggests it won't. You only see the green lights and ignore all the red ones.
Then there's availability bias.
This is confusing recent with frequent. If you just read a news story about a data breach, you might overestimate the risk of a breach at your own company, completely ignoring the actual statistics. The vivid recent memory outweighs the data.
Anchoring. This one kills us in negotiations.
Oh, it does. The first number thrown on the table anchors the entire conversation. If a vendor says, this usually costs $100,000, that becomes the benchmark. If they drop to $80,000, you think you're getting a great deal, even if the product is only worth $50,000.
Survivorship bias. I feel like this is the plague of business books.
We should do what Apple did.
Right.
Well, for every Apple, there are 1,000 companies that did the exact same things and went bankrupt. But we don't see them. We only look at the survivors, so we draw these false conclusions about cause and effect.
And finally, the halo effect.
Letting one positive trait overshadow everything else. This candidate went to a top university, so they must be a great leader, a hard worker, and a creative thinker. You let the halo of the degree blind you to their actual gaps in skill.
So how do we fight this? The guide suggests we can bias-proof our process.
You can't turn off your brain's biases, but you can build friction into the system. One key tactic is defining your success criteria before you see the options.
So you grant move the goalpost later just to make your favorite option win.
Exactly. Another powerful tool is the pre-mortem.
I love this concept. It flips the optimism bias on its head.
It does. Before you sign a deal, you gather the team and say, okay, imagine it's 1 year from now and this project has failed spectacularly. Write down the story of why it failed.
It makes it safe to be a pessimist.
It rewards people for finding the flaws. It uncovers risks that people were too polite or too scared to mention when everyone was in, cheerleader mode.
The guide also mentions blind scoring.
Yeah, if you're hiring or selecting a vendor, try to score the proposal without looking at the name. Remove the halo of the brand or the person and just look at the work itself.
This all brings us to implementation. We have the models, the toolkit, the bias checks. But the danger here is bureaucracy. If I have to fill out a Pew matrix to order lunch, I am quitting. How do we right-size this?
That is the fear, isn't it? That process becomes a dirty word. The expert advice here is to use a selector heuristic. It's a quick mental filter based on 4 things: time, information, stakes, and team.
Walk us through that.
If stakes are high and time is ample, go rational. Do the 7 steps. If it's urgent and the cost of inaction is high, satisfice. Get it done.
And if it's cross-functional?
Then the team filter kicks in. You need rapid. You need to clarify roles. The goal is to match the tool to the problem. You don't need a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
There's one final practical point that really stood out to me, especially for remote teams. Documentation. The source calls it the single source of truth.
This is non-negotiable in the modern workplace. If you're working in a hybrid or remote setup, you cannot rely on hallway conversations. You have to document not just the decision, but the rationale.
Why is the rationale so important? Why not just write down, we chose option B?
Because 6 months from now, you'll have forgotten the context.
Yeah.
Or a new person will join and say, why on earth did we choose option B? If you didn't write down the why, the trade-offs, the constraints you had at the time, you end up with what I call zombie decisions.
Zombie decisions.
They keep coming back from the dead. You waste days relitigating issues you already solved because nobody remembers why you solved them that way. Documenting the why kills the zombies.
It prevents that endless loop. Looking forward, the conclusion of the article suggests a one-page playbook approach.
Keep it simple. You don't need a 50-page manual. You just need a simple sheet. What's the step? Who owns it? What's the outcome? And crucially, you build a culture where calling out a bias isn't an insult.
That is the dream, isn't it? To be in a meeting where a junior employee can say to the CEO, I think we might be anchoring on that initial number. The CEO says, good catch.
That's what a high-performance decision culture looks like. It shifts the focus from being right to getting it right.
I think that is the perfect summary. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about having the smartest process.
Absolutely.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the rationale versus satisficing spectrum to the mechanics of rapid and the psychology of bias. The main takeaway here is that decision-making is a skill. It's something you can upgrade.
And in a world where AI is starting to handle the data processing, our human ability to frame the decisions, set the criteria, and check for strategic bias, that is going to be our most valuable asset.
The machines can crunch the numbers, but we have to set the direction.
That's it.
I want to say a huge thank you to you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast. We know how busy you are, and we hope this helps you reclaim some of that time by making sharper choices.
Indeed.
If you found this deep dive helpful, please subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next one. And I strongly encourage you to click the link in the show notes to read Felix Römer's full article. We described the Pew matrix and the decision trees, but seeing the visual diagrams really makes it all click.
It's definitely worth the read.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep unlocking your potential.
Goodbye, everyone.